The text came at 7 in the morning. She was standing in the bathroom in a towel, 7 months pregnant, belly round and heavy, steam still thick in the air. She read it once, twice, 3 times. Her husband had written, "I need some space to figure things out. Don't make this harder than it has to be. No period at the end." Like he couldn't even be bothered to finish the sentence. She called him. Voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She walked to the gym bag by the front door, the one she had been stepping over for 9 days, telling herself he was coming back. She unzipped it. Empty. It had always been empty. And somewhere tropical, on a hotel balcony, with 2 champagne glasses and another woman, her husband was wearing the watch she had saved 4 months to buy him. She had nothing. No lease in her name, no savings to last the year. 8 weeks until she gave birth, alone. But here's what Derek did not know. In 72 hours, Nora Calloway would be living inside a billionaire's estate. In 3 months, she would walk into a mediation room and watch her husband's lawyer read a file he was not prepared for. And when Derek finally came back, full of confidence, full of rehearsed speeches, certain she had been waiting, she would open the door, look him in the eye, and feel absolutely nothing but peace. This is the story of what happens when a man underestimates the woman he left behind. Lesson statement. The life you planned is not always the life that was meant for you. Sometimes losing what you held on to is the only way to find out what you're actually capable of holding. If this story made you feel something, if any part of Nora's journey hit close to home, let us know in the comments below. Your words mean more than you know, and they help us understand what stories matter to you most. If you believe someone in your life needs to hear this today, please share it with them. Sometimes the right story finds us at exactly the right time. Like this video if you stayed until the end. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. Every week we bring you new narratives about women who chose themselves when no one else would. Nora's story is waiting for you. Stay with her. She is worth it.
The phone buzzed. It was sitting on the bathroom counter, face up, next to her moisturizer and her prenatal vitamins, and the small rubber duck Lena had given her as a joke 3 months ago. Nora heard it from inside the shower. She turned off the water. She reached for her towel. She was not in a hurry. She thought it was probably her doctor's office confirming Thursday's appointment. She thought it was probably Lena sending a meme. She thought it was probably nothing. She picked up the phone with a damp hand. She read the message. She read it again. She read it a 3rd time. The steam from the shower was still thick in the air. The mirror was fogged over. The rubber duck sat on the counter, looking at her, with its painted-on smile. Nora stood in her towel. 7 months pregnant, belly round and heavy and tight. And she read the message one more time. Derek had written, "I need some space to figure things out. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I'll be in touch." No period at the end. Like he couldn't be bothered to finish the sentence. She set the phone face down on the counter. She picked it up again. She read it again. She set it down. She picked it up. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. She thought, this is not happening. She thought, he is just overwhelmed. She thought, men get scared when the baby is coming. It is a documented thing. She had read about it in 2 different pregnancy books. She thought, he just needs a few days, and he will call and explain, and it will make sense. She had been thinking these things for 3 weeks, since he started sleeping on the couch, since he stopped asking how her appointments went, since he stopped putting his hand on her belly when the baby kicked, since his answers to her questions got shorter and shorter, until they were mostly just sounds. Since the gym bag appeared by the front door, and he said he was staying at Jude's for a few days to give them both some breathing room, and she had said, okay, because she did not know what else to say. She had been thinking these things for 3 weeks, and she had been wrong for 3 weeks. And somewhere in her body, she had known she was wrong, but she had kept thinking them anyway because the alternative was this: standing in a steamy bathroom in a towel, 7 months pregnant, reading a text that ended without a period. She got dressed slowly. She moved to the kitchen. She filled the kettle and turned it on and stood at the window, looking out at the street below. The morning was gray. A man walked a small dog. A taxi stopped, and someone got out with a briefcase. The city was going about its business with complete indifference to the fact that Nora's life had just changed shape. She checked her phone again. No follow-up message, no call. She called Derek. Voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She set the phone on the kitchen table and looked at it. Her apartment was their apartment. Derek's name was on the lease. His taste was in the furniture. The gray sectional he had picked, the coffee table that was too sharp-edged for a home with a baby coming, the abstract print on the wall that Nora had never actually liked but had never said so. His gym bag was still by the front door. She looked at the gym bag. She had been stepping over it for 9 days. Every morning, she stepped over it on her way to the kitchen. Every night, she stepped over it on her way to bed. It meant he was coming back. It meant he had just stepped out. It meant this was temporary. She walked to the gym bag. She crouched down, which took effort now, the baby making everything below her waist a negotiation. She unzipped it. It was empty. Not just empty, clean empty. Like it had been there a long time, and nothing had ever been put inside it since. She touched the fabric lining. She looked at the space inside. She zipped it back up. She thought, oh. She sat down on the kitchen floor, not because she fainted, not because she fell. She just sat down. The linoleum was cold through her leggings. The baby kicked hard, once, as if to say, I'm still here. Nora put both hands on her belly and sat on the kitchen floor and breathed. The kettle boiled and clicked off. She did not get up. She called Lena. Lena answered on the second ring. She did not say hello. She said, "Where are you?" "I'm coming." That was the thing about Lena. She could read silence the way other people read text. Lena arrived in 22 minutes. She had her coat on, over pajama pants. She had clearly run out of her apartment and gotten straight into a cab. She knocked twice and then tried the handle because Nora had left it unlocked. She came in and looked at Nora, who had moved from the floor to the couch but was not sure when that had happened. Lena sat down next to her. She did not say anything. She looked at Nora's face and the gym bag by the door and the phone on the cushion between them, and she was quiet for 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds of pure, warm, understanding silence. Then she said, "How long have you known?" Nora said, "I think I've known for a while." Lena nodded. She picked up the phone. She read the text. She set the phone down. Then Lena's phone buzzed. She looked at it. Her face did something complicated, something that moved through surprise and into a kind of careful stillness. She said, "Nora, has Derek ever mentioned someone named Simone?" Lena held the phone out. Nora looked at the screen. It was an Instagram profile. The account name was Simone Vickers. The bio said, "Living slowly, loving loudly." The profile photo showed a woman with long dark hair and a practiced smile, the kind of smile that knew it was being photographed. Lena had been sent the link by a mutual acquaintance 20 minutes ago with a message that said, "Is this Derek?" The most recent post was a hotel balcony, tropical somewhere, 2 champagne flutes catching the light, and a man's hand resting on the railing. His watch, Derek's watch, the one with the square face and the brown leather band. The one Nora had given him for their 3rd anniversary, the one he wore every day, the one she had saved for 4 months to afford. His hand, on a balcony somewhere tropical, with champagne. He was not at Jude's. He had never been at Jude's. Nora handed the phone back to Lena. She sat very still. She thought about the last 4 months, with the brutal efficiency of a woman who has just been handed the key to a locked room. She went through the months methodically, the way she used to organize files at work, month by month, event by event. She put the key in each lock and turned it. The late nights with explanations that were just slightly too detailed. The weekend work trips that produced no receipts. The way he had gone quiet whenever she talked about the nursery. The way he had stopped reaching for her in bed and then stopped coming to bed at the same time entirely. The way he had looked at her belly one morning with an expression she had identified as fear at the time, but was now identifying as something else, something more like guilt. I was so stupid, she thought. The signs were all there. I kept explaining them away. I kept building little shelters out of reasonable explanations and climbing inside and calling it fine. She said out loud, "I'm not crazy." I knew something was wrong. I kept being told I was anxious because of the pregnancy. I was not anxious. I was right. Lena said, "You were right." Nora said, "How long has that account been up?" Lena looked. She scrolled back. She said, "At least a year." A year. Nora did the math. She had been pregnant for 7 months. They had been trying for 4 months before that. She'd been trying to build a family with a man who had been doing this for at least a year. Lena called Jude. She did it without asking Nora, because Nora's hands had gone very still, and Lena could see that Nora needed someone else to make the calls right now. Jude picked up on this first ring. The guilt in his voice arrived before words did. It was in the breath he took when he heard Lena say his name. It was in the half-second pause before he said hello. Lena put the phone on speaker. Jude knew. He had known since February. He had tried to talk Derek out of it. Derek had told him to stay out of his marriage. Jude had told Derek he was making a catastrophic mistake. Derek had said he needed to figure himself out and that Jude didn't understand. "He's coming back next Tuesday," Jude said. His voice was heavy with shame. "He told me he just needed to get it out of his system, and then he would come home and be the husband you deserve." Nora went very quiet. She said, "He said that, get it out of his system." Jude said, "Nora, I'm sorry. I should have told you." Nora said, "Yes, you should have." She did not say it with anger. She said it with a flatness that was worse than anger. Lena ended the call. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nora opened her laptop. She searched, "Rights of pregnant women during separation in this state." She searched, "What happens to joint assets during separation?" She searched, "Can a husband remove himself from a lease without notice?" She wrote things down in the notebook she had bought for baby name lists. Pink cover with small gold stars. She wrote in a new kind of handwriting. Slower, more deliberate, like someone taking notes on something that mattered. At some point, around 2 in the morning, she stopped and made chamomile tea. She stood at the kitchen window in the dark apartment drinking it. The street below was quiet. A dog barked somewhere. Her baby shifted inside her, a long, slow roll like someone turning over in sleep. Nora put one hand on the curve of her belly. She said quietly, "I've got you. I have always got you." She finished her tea. She went back to the laptop. By morning, she had a list of 3 family lawyers, a rough understanding of her financial situation, and a very clear picture of how much trouble she was in. The apartment lease was in Derek's name. Their joint account was lower than it should have been by nearly $8,000, withdrawn in increments small enough not to trigger alerts. Her freelance work had been paused since the 2nd trimester. Her due date was 8 weeks away. Her savings would cover 2 months, maybe 3 if she stopped eating anything but rice. She thought, "I have nothing." She corrected herself immediately. "I have 8 weeks to figure this out." The FedEx package arrived at 9:30 in the morning. Inside, legal separation papers. Formal ones, from a law office in another city. He had them prepared before the trip. Before the hotel balcony and the champagne and the anniversary watch resting on the railing. He had walked into a lawyer's office in another city and had papers drawn up while she was buying tiny socks and comparing crib mattresses. There was a handwritten note tucked inside the envelope. His handwriting, which she had once loved, which had once seemed like evidence of character. It said, "I know this isn't what you wanted. I'm sorry. Please don't make this ugly. Please don't make this ugly." She read it twice. She set it on the table. She picked up her phone and scrolled to a contact she had not used in 2 years. A woman from her old job, a real estate broker named Carla, who had pressed her card into Nora's hand at a going-away party and said, "If you ever need anything, you call me. Anything at all." She called. Carla answered on the third ring, her voice warm and slightly surprised. Nora said, "It's Nora Calloway." "I know it's been a while." Carla said, "Nora, I was just thinking about you. Are you sitting down? I have something to tell you." Nora sat down. Carla spoke quickly, the way she always had, like someone who had learned that hesitation lets doubt in. She said, "Grant Harlow's estate director has been looking for someone, a live-in property curator. 3 months, maybe 4. The job involves documenting and cataloging his late wife's art collection before a major estate restructuring. They need someone with a design eye, a marketing background, organizational skills, full salary, private suite in the main house, and full medical coverage, which includes prenatal care through delivery and beyond." Nora said, "Carla, I'm 7 months pregnant." Carla said, "I know. He knows. I told him when I recommended you, and he said," I'm quoting him directly, "he said a baby in the house would be a welcome sound." Nora looked at the FedEx envelope on the table. She looked at the separation papers. She looked at the pink notebook with the gold stars. She thought, "This is insane. This is absolutely insane. I don't know this man. I'm not the kind of person who does things like this." Then she thought, "But what kind of person am I right now? Exactly. A woman in an apartment whose lease isn't in her name. A woman whose husband is on a tropical balcony. A woman with 8 weeks until she gives birth and 2 months of savings and a pink notebook full of legal research. What kind of person is that? And what does that person have to lose?" She said, "Tell me about him." Carla told her, Grant Harlow, 44 years old, founder and CEO of Harlow Developments, one of the largest private real estate development firms in the country. Widower, his wife Claire had died 3 years ago from an illness that had come fast and left no time to prepare. He had a house, a property, really, the word house did not quite cover it, in the hills. He worked. He kept to himself. His staff spoke well of him, which Carla said was the most reliable indicator of character she knew. Nora said, "When can I meet him?" She met Grant Harlow the following afternoon. She had expected someone cold, someone who wore power the way some men wore expensive watches, performatively, so you would notice. She had prepared herself for that. She had put on the one dress that still fit, and she had done her hair, and she had practiced being calm in the cab on the way there. The cab pulled through iron gates and up a long drive, and the house at the end of it was large in the way that certain old houses are large, not aggressively so, but with the quiet confidence of something that has been standing a long time and expects to keep standing. Gardens on both sides, a lemon tree near the front entrance that looked like it needed attention. Grant Harlow met her in the entrance hall. He was tall, dark hair going slightly gray at the temples. He wore a dark sweater and looked like a man who had been through something difficult and come out the other side. Not unscathed, she could see the marks, but intact, functional, present. His first words were, "Ms. Calloway, thank you for coming. Can I get you water? Tea? We have decent decaf if you need it." She had not expected decaf. She had not expected him to have already thought about what she could drink. She said, "Decaf would be wonderful, thank you." He showed her the collection first. Not the guest suite, not the salary, not the logistics, the art. He walked her through 3 rooms of it, and he talked about the pieces the way someone talks about things they love but are not sure how to keep. There was a painting of a coastline that Clara had found at a gallery closing. There was a series of photographs taken in a city Nora didn't recognize. There was a sculpture made of pieces of discarded metal that should not have been beautiful and absolutely was. Nora forgot to be afraid. She talked about the collection. She had opinions, specific ones. She said things like, "These 2 pieces are in conversation with each other, and they shouldn't be separated in the catalog." And he listened with the focused attention of someone who was hearing something useful. He offered her the position before she left. The suite was a private wing with its own entrance and a sitting room and the windows that looked out over the garden. The salary was more than she had been making before she went freelance. The medical coverage was comprehensive. She said she would think about it. She was in the cab home before she admitted she had already decided. She moved into Harlow House 5 days later. That evening, packing her things, she opened the box on the closet shelf. Wedding photos. She had not looked at them since November. She sat on the floor of her bedroom. She kept ending up on floors, she noticed. This was becoming a theme. And she went through them, photo by photo. She and Derek at the altar. She and Derek at the reception, her head back laughing at something she couldn't remember now. She and Derek on the dance floor, his hand on the small of her back, both of them looking at each other with the particular expression of people who believe what they're feeling is permanent. She looked at her own face in the photographs. She had been so happy, genuinely, completely, without any reservation, happy. She had not been performing happiness. She had been living inside it, taking up all its space, not saving any room for doubt. The cruelest thing, she thought, isn't what he did. The cruelest thing is that the happy memories are real. He can't take them back, and she can't either. She loved a man who was already becoming someone else, and she had no idea. And those years were real, and they're also gone, and both things are true at the same time. She put the photos back. She closed the box. She did not put the box in her moving bag. Her wedding ring sat on the bathroom counter where she had left it the morning of the gym bag. She looked at it for a long time. The metal caught the light, small and solid and completely silent. She left it there. She zipped her bag. Grant's mother, Rosalind, was in the entrance hall when Nora arrived at Harlow House the next morning with 2 bags and a box of books. Rosalind was 72 and looked like a woman who had made a study of noticing things. She looked at Nora the way you look at something you are trying to correctly identify. She said, "You're younger than I expected." Nora said, "I'm older than I look." Something shifted in Rosalind's expression. The faintest possible recalibration. Almost approval, almost. That night, Nora lay in the largest, quietest bed she had ever slept in and looked at the ceiling and listened to the house settle around her. It was an old sound, comfortable, like the house breathing. Her phone buzzed. Derek. He had written, "Jude told me you moved out. Where are you staying? We should talk before you do anything drastic." She read it. She set the phone face down on the nightstand. She thought, "I already did the drastic thing, Derek. I survived you." She slept better than she had in 4 months. The work was real. That was the first thing she noticed. She had half expected something decorative, something that would keep her occupied without actually requiring anything of her. But Clara Harlow's collection was substantial and almost entirely uncatalogued, and the estate restructuring was on a real timeline, and there was genuine work to be done. Nora was good at it, better than she expected. She had a system within 3 days: photograph, document, research provenance where possible, note condition, flag pieces that needed professional appraisal. She moved through the collection methodically and found herself spending longer than necessary in front of pieces that surprised her. a small oil painting of hands, a textile piece that looked simple until you got close. She had forgotten she was good at things. That thought stopped her one morning in front of the coastline painting. She stood there with her clipboard and thought, when did I forget that? When did I start thinking of my own competence as something that needed permission? She did not answer the question. She photographed the painting and moved on. Grant moved through the house quietly. He worked from a home office 3 days a week and from downtown offices the other 2. When they crossed paths, in the kitchen, in the mornings, in the hallway in the afternoons, he asked real questions, not performative ones, not the questions people ask when they want you to know they asked. He said one morning, "How are the lower back issues?" Carla mentioned that's common at this stage. She stopped. She said, "You talked to Carla about pregnancy symptoms." He said, "I looked them up. I wanted to make sure the guest suite chair had proper lumbar support. I had the chair replaced last week." She looked at him for a moment. She did not know what to do with a man who researched lumbar support before she moved in. She said, "Thank you, that was thoughtful." He said, "There's also a step stool in the bathroom if you need it. And I asked the kitchen to keep ginger tea stocked." He said it the way someone says a practical thing. Matter of fact. Like it was just information. She said, "You've thought about a lot of things." He said, "I try to think about what's needed before it becomes an emergency." Old habit. He went back to his coffee. She went back to her clipboard. She thought about Derek, who had not once in 7 months of pregnancy researched a single thing, who had needed to be reminded about appointments, who had looked up from his phone when she told him about their daughter's heartbeat and said, "Cool," and gone back to scrolling. On a Tuesday, 3 weeks into her time at Harlow House, her phone rang. Derek. She almost did not answer. She answered. He sounded relaxed. She could hear a faint echo that suggested he was somewhere with high ceilings. He asked how she was doing, and before she could answer, he said, "I've been thinking, and I think if we approach this maturely, we can work out something fair for everyone." Everyone, she thought. He means himself and Simone. He continued. He had spoken to a lawyer. He thought they could settle the separation quickly and cleanly. He was prepared to pay child support, a number, he said, with the confidence of a man who expected it to be accepted. He was prepared to help her find a new apartment in a more affordable neighborhood, which meant a neighborhood he had already decided was appropriate for her. He was sorry this was the situation, but he thought they both knew it wasn't working. She said, "We were having a baby. You agreed we were ready. You said you were excited." He said, "I was scared. People say things when they're scared." She thought of every time she had been scared in the last 7 months. Every night she had lain awake doing math. Every moment in a waiting room. Every time she had reached for his hand and found him already somewhere else. She said, "I was scared too, Derek. The difference is, I didn't abandon anyone." She hung up. She went to the garden. The afternoon was cool and the roses were just beginning, small buds tight and promising along the south wall. She sat on a stone bench and put her hands on her belly and felt the baby move. 2 kicks, firm and deliberate, like punctuation. She said, "I know, me too." The anger was clarifying. That was the thing about it. It was not the messy, leaking anger of the early days. The anger that blurred into grief and back again. This was clean. This had edges. This was the anger of a woman who was done waiting to see what she would be left with. She called the lawyer Lena had found. She made a real appointment for the following week. Patrice Calloway called that same evening. Derek's mother. She had heard from Derek, and Derek's version of events involved Nora being difficult, refusing to communicate, making everything harder than it needed to be. Nora said, "He left me, 7 months pregnant." Patrice said, "He needs room to grow. Some men aren't ready, and you have to give them space." I have been giving him space, Nora thought, since the day I met him. I have been making myself smaller, quieter, easier, to make room for a man who took all the room I gave him and then wanted more. I made myself into a hallway for him to move through, and he moved through me, straight to someone else. She did not say this. She said, I have to go, Patrice. I have a doctor's appointment. She did not have a doctor's appointment. She went to the garden and sat in the last of the afternoon sun and let the anger settle into something harder and more useful. Something with weight to it. Something she could stand on. At 11 o'clock that night, she caught herself in the linen closet of her suite. She was folding and refolding the same pillowcase. She had been doing it for possibly 10 minutes. The closet was already organized. It had been organized since her second day. She was folding and refolding because she needed something to do with her hands while her brain worked. She laughed, out loud, alone in the linen closet. She laughed. She said to herself, there it is, the midnight organization. She put the pillowcase down. She went to bed. At dinner, 2 days later, Grant said, over pasta, in the tone of someone relaying neutral information, my attorneys have been made aware that a Mr. Derek Calloway has contacted Harlow Development's main line. He's been asking about the company and about recent staffing hires. Nora set down her fork. She said, he's checking up on me. Grant said, it appears so. Warren thought you should know. I thought you should know. He looked at her across the table. You're not in any danger, are you? She said, no, he's not dangerous. He just doesn't like not knowing things. Grant said, He turned back to his pasta. We'll leave him wondering then. She looked at him, at the side of his face, the slight angle of his jaw, the complete absence of drama in his expression. He had just told her that her estranged husband had called his company, and his response was, we'll leave him wondering. And he said it the way someone says, pass the salt. She thought, I have been surrounded by complicated men my entire adult life. I did not know uncomplicated looked like this. The weeks at Harlow House had their own texture. She noticed it gradually, the way you notice a change in weather. Not the moment it happens, but sometime after, when you realize the air feels different and you can't say exactly when it shifted. She woke up before her alarm. She had opinions about things. She laughed, genuinely, without calculation, more often than she had in over a year. She was cataloging a series of black and white photographs in the East Wing when she realized she had been humming. She could not remember the last time she had hummed. She was not sure she had ever hummed. She stood in the East Wing with her clipboard and thought about what it meant that she was humming, and decided it meant she was okay. She was actually okay. The baby was due in 5 weeks. She had a lawyer. She had a plan. She had a salary going into an account in her name only. She had a suite with good lumbar support and ginger tea in the kitchen, and a view of a garden where the roses were opening. She had herself back. She was not sure when she had lost herself or how gradually it had happened, but she was finding things now. Small things, the part of her that had opinions about art, the part that liked silence in the mornings, the part that could work for 4 straight hours and feel satisfied at the end. Grant was not a simple man, but he was a consistent one. He said what he meant. He followed through. He did not need applause for ordinary decency. He practiced kindness the way some people practice piano, regularly, without audience, because it was the kind of person he had decided to be. She was awake at 3 in the morning when she heard him. She had been unable to sleep for an hour. The baby was active, and her lower back was aching despite the chair adjustments, and she had tried 3 different positions and finally given up and come down to the kitchen for water. Grant was already there. He was standing at the counter with a glass of water, reading something on his phone, in a gray shirt and bare feet. He looked up when she came in. Neither of them said anything for a moment. He said, "Insomnia?" She said, "The baby thinks 3 in the morning is the correct time to practice gymnastics." He said, "I'll make tea." He made tea. She sat at the kitchen island. He leaned against the counter across from her, and they talked for 40 minutes about nothing important. About the collection, about a documentary she had watched about deep-sea fish, about whether the lemon tree in the garden was salvageable. He thought yes, with attention. She agreed, with attention. It was the most normal conversation she had had with a man in as long as she could remember. She drove home the next morning from the lawyer's office with the windows cracked and the radio on, and thought about when Derek and she had stopped talking like that. Not about big things, about nothing important. They must have once, in the beginning. She could remember, vaguely, the particular ease of early conversations. When had it become performance? When had she started choosing her words for effect instead of truth? She got home and opened the baby name notebook and turned to a new page. She wrote at the top, "Things I stopped doing after I married Derek." The list was longer than she expected, calling her college friends, not for any reason, just because the calls had slowly stopped and she had let them stop. Cooking the food she actually liked, which was spicier than Derek preferred, and so she had gradually adjusted, having opinions about where to go on weekends, saying no without appending an apology, reading for pleasure. She had not finished a book in 2 years. She stared at the list. She thought, I didn't lose these things all at once. I gave them up one at a time, each one small enough that it didn't feel like a loss, each one reasonable, each one temporary. Except none of them had been temporary. Lena came for dinner that Thursday and brought takeout and a magazine and said nothing important about any of it until after they had eaten and were sitting with cups of decaf. Then she looked at Nora across the table and said, "You look different." Nora said, "Different how?" Lena said, "Like you remembered who you were." On a Friday afternoon, her phone buzzed with a notification she had not seen coming. Simone's Instagram had posted a new image. Nora had muted the account months ago and did not understand why she was seeing it until she realized Lena had sent a screenshot. The image was a single flower, a pink rose, very specific, the pale, dusty pink of a variety Nora recognized. In the caption, "When someone finally treats you like a priority." Nora looked at the rose. She looked at it for a long time. She knew that rose. She had described it to Derek one evening in the fall in the kitchen, while looking at nursery inspiration on her laptop. She had said, "I want that exact rose in the nursery corner, that dusty pink one." He had glanced over and said, "Sure, whatever you want." He had been on his phone when she said it. She had thought he wasn't listening. He had been listening. He had taken the small, intimate thing she said and offered it to someone else as romance. She thought he never listened because he cared. He listened so he would know what to offer someone else. She closed the screenshot. She opened her lawyer's contact. She typed, "I want to revisit the child support figure. I have new documentation to discuss." Her lawyer replied within the hour. "Now we're talking." The strongest prenatal appointment yet was that Thursday. The baby was positioned correctly, heart beating fast and steady, all measurements where they should be. Dr. Carla Benson pressed the Doppler to Nora's belly and turned the speaker outward so Nora could hear it clearly. That sound, fast and fierce and completely certain. Carla said, "Healthy as can be?" Nora cried. Not from sadness, not from relief exactly, from the particular emotion of confirmation. Something she was responsible for was thriving. She was doing the most important thing right. She drove back to Harlow House with the windows cracked. The baby was quiet now, settled, a warm weight she could feel even behind the seatbelt. She pulled through the iron gates and parked and sat in the car for a moment. She thought about Derek texting her from a tropical hotel. She thought about the empty gym bag. She thought about the note that said, "Please don't make this ugly," written by a man who had made it very ugly indeed, and was asking her to pretend otherwise. She was done pretending. She got out of the car. She walked into Harlow House. Rosalind was in the front sitting room, waiting. "Sit down, Nora," she said. "Is something wrong?" Nora asked. "Nothing is wrong," Rosalind said. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." She folded her hands in her lap. "My son? What do you think of him?" Nora sat. She thought about how to answer honestly. She said, "I think he is the most decent man I have encountered in years, and I am being very careful not to mistake that for something it isn't." Rosalind was quiet for a moment. She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "You are smarter than you look." It started as a good day. The catalog was ahead of schedule. The estate director had emailed Grant to say he was impressed with the progress. Rosalind had invited Nora for afternoon tea in the yellow sitting room and had shown her photographs of the house from the 1970s when Rosalind had first moved in as a young bride. The photographs were black and white, and Rosalind in them was striking in a way that made complete sense when you looked at her now. They had talked for 2 hours about the house, about Clara, about a trip Rosalind had once taken to Scotland that she still considered the best 2 weeks of her life. Nora had told her about a summer she had spent at her grandmother's farmhouse when she was 9, and Rosalind had listened the way very few people listen, with her full attention, without waiting for her turn. It had been a genuinely good day. Then Jude called. He called at 8 in the evening, and she could hear in his voice that he had been sitting on the information for a while and had finally decided he had to say it. Derek and Simone were back. They were staying at Patrice's house. They had told the family they were serious, that this was real, that Derek was finally, in Patrice's words, living authentically. He was telling people she had changed, Jude said. His voice was tight with the particular shame of a decent person who has been complicit in something indecent. "He's made you the reason, Nora. He's telling everyone you became someone he didn't recognize." Nora thanked Jude. She ended the call. She sat on the edge of the bed in her suite and thought, "Of course I changed. I was growing a human being while my husband was growing a relationship with someone else. I changed because life changed. I thought we were both changing. I thought that was what we were doing together." She thought about Patrice saying living authentically. She thought about Derek, who had never once in their marriage asked her what she needed, who had never once sat with her in the particular discomfort of a hard conversation without deflecting into logic, who had said people say things when they're scared as if fear exempted you from responsibility. She ran a bath. She got in fully clothed. She had not planned to. She had gone into the bathroom to wash her face, and the bath was there, and the water was warm, and she just got in. Leggings and the oversized shirt she had been wearing all day and all. She turned off the taps and sat in the warm water with her belly above the surface like an island, and she let herself feel all of it. The marriage, the version of herself that had believed in it, the nursery she had designed in her head, the colors she had chosen, the small shelf she had imagined for board books, the future she had been building in good faith while he was building a different future in bad faith. She grieved the woman who hadn't known yet. That was the specific grief. Not Derek, not the marriage exactly. The woman she had been 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, who had believed she was making a life with someone. That woman. She grieved her specifically and completely, sitting in the bathtub in her clothes, with the water cooling and the garden quiet outside the window. Then she got out. She changed. She lay down. She could not sleep. She picked up her phone at 2 in the morning and started searching. How do you know if you fell for a narcissist? Signs of emotional immaturity in men. How to co-parent with someone you do not trust. What is Darvo? How long does it take to trust your own judgment after a betrayal? She was not looking for answers exactly. She was looking for confirmation that she was not the only one, that this happened to other people, that other people had sat in bathtubs in their clothes and searched these things at 2 in the morning and had come out the other side. She found it. Page after page of it. Women writing in forums and comment sections, women who had been exactly where she was, women who were on the other side and describing what the other side looked like. She read until 4 in the morning. She was not scared of the information. The information was company. She put her phone down She put both hands on her belly. The baby moved, a long, slow roll, someone turning over in sleep. She said quietly, "I hear you. I know you're there. I've got you. I'm figuring it out. I promise I'm figuring it out." The room was dark and still, and she thought, "I am afraid of my own judgment. I chose him. I trusted my instincts, and my instincts were wrong. And now I am about to be someone's mother. And what if I get that wrong too? What if I am the kind of person who gets important things wrong?" She sat with that fear. She did not try to argue herself out of it. She sat with it the way you sit with a difficult guest, not inviting it to stay, but not pretending it isn't there. A knock at the sitting room door. She looked at the time, 5:30. The sky outside was just beginning to change. She said, "Come in." Grant opened the door. He had seen the light under it. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not ask anything. He stood in the doorway in the gray early light and said, "Do you want company?" She said, "Yes." He came in. He sat in the chair across from her. He had a book. He opened it and read. She sat on the couch with her phone in her lap and her thoughts and the slowly brightening window, and he read, and they were quiet together, and the quiet was the kind that helps. When the light came fully through the windows, she said, "My husband told people I changed." Grant did not look up from his book. He said, "You did. Changing is how things survive." She was quiet for a moment. She said, "Yes, I suppose it is." The next morning, a certified letter arrived. From Derek directly, not his lawyer. He was requesting written confirmation of his right to introduce the baby to Simone at the first scheduled visit. He was already writing Nora out of decisions. He was already planning a future where his girlfriend was present at Nora's child's first moments with her father. Nora read the letter twice. She thought, "This is where I stop being reasonable." She picked up her phone. She called her lawyer. The phone rang once. She said, "I've changed my mind about the custody terms. I want everything we discussed and then some. Let's talk this morning if you can." Her lawyer said, "I can be available in 30 minutes. "Good," Nora said. "I'll be ready." She walked into the lawyer's office at 9 sharp. She sat down across from her lawyer, a woman named Frances, with sharp eyes and a reputation for not losing, and she opened her pink notebook, and for the first time, she did not begin with, "I'm sorry, I know this is complicated." She did not begin with, "I don't want to cause problems," or "I just want to be fair." She opened to the first page of her notes, and she said, "Here is what I want." Frances blinked. She put down her pen. She said, "Let's hear it." Full primary custody. A structured visitation schedule reviewed by a family court judge, not settled privately. The complete legal share of their joint assets, including the $8,000 withdrawn from the joint account during their separation. Child support calculated on Derek's actual income, not the figure his lawyer had offered, which was a number apparently arrived at by some calculation Nora's lawyer described as optimistic. She also wanted his name removed from her medical records as emergency contact. She also wanted his girlfriend's presence prohibited at any custody handoff for the first year. Frances wrote it all down. She said, "All of this is achievable." Nora said, "Then let's achieve it." She went back to Harlow House and noticed, somewhere between the gate and the front door, that she was walking differently, straighter. Not because she had told herself to stand up straight, but because something had shifted in the architecture of how she was carrying herself. Less apology in her posture, more room. She noticed it at dinner, when she said, simply and directly, that she preferred the lamb to be less done. And the kitchen prepared it again without it being a thing. And she ate it, and she thought, when did asking for what I want become such a strange and radical act? Lena came for the afternoon 2 days later. She brought a balloon that said, "Girl Power" in gold letters, and claimed with absolute conviction that it was the last one at the drugstore. Nora did not believe this for a second. They ate takeout on the floor of the sitting room because neither of them wanted to sit at a table. And Lena said, "You look different." Nora said, "You said that last time." Lena said, "Last time you looked like you remembered who you were. This time you look like you decided you liked her." Nora thought about that. She said, "I think that's right." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Lena asked about Grant without asking about Grant, which she accomplished by talking about Harlow House and asking neutral questions about the atmosphere and the routines. And Nora answered the questions she was actually being asked. She said, "He made me decaf the first morning. He had researched pregnancy symptoms before I moved in. He replaced the chair in the guest suite for lumbar support." Lena said, "He replaced the chair." Nora said, "Without being asked, without telling me until after." Lena looked at her. She said, "That's a man who was raised right." Nora said, "I know, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not doing anything about it. I'm just noticing." Lena said, "Noticing is fine." Something else happened that week. She realized she had stopped checking Derek's social media. She could not say exactly when it had happened. She had simply noticed one morning that she had no urge to look, and then she had tried to remember the last time she had looked, and she could not. A week, maybe, possibly longer. The absence of that particular compulsion was its own kind of relief, like a tooth that had stopped aching. You only noticed the pain was gone once it was gone. She wrote in her notebook that evening, "I am not starting over. I am starting from a different place." Those are not the same thing. Starting over implies I am going back to the beginning. I am not. I am going forward from exactly where I am with everything I have learned, which is considerable. Grant found her in the garden the following evening. He came out with 2 mugs of tea and sat beside her on the stone bench without asking if she wanted company, which she had come to understand was how he operated. He offered presents rather than permission. He said, "I've been thinking about a piece in the East Wing, the metal sculpture. I think you're right that it shouldn't be in the catalog under industrial. It's something else." She said, "It's grief. The whole thing is a meditation on grief. The gaps between the pieces are as important as the pieces themselves." He was quiet for a moment. He said, "Clara would have liked you." She looked at him. He was looking at the garden. His face was composed but not closed. She said, "Tell me about her." He told her. Clara had been methodical and funny and had loved the art collection, the way you love something that proves a point you believe in. She had believed that beauty survived everything, that it was the most persistent human impulse. Not destruction, not accumulation, but the need to make things that were beautiful for no practical reason at all. He said, "I'm still working on believing that." She said, "Me too." They were quiet for a while. The comfortable kind. Derek called at 10 that night. She was already in bed reading. He sounded different, less smooth, less like someone who had rehearsed. He said, "I heard you got a lawyer, a real one." She said, "I did?" He said, "Nora, come on. You don't have to make this a war." She said, "I'm not making it a war. I'm making it fair. Those feel the same from where you're standing because you were used to winning." She hung up. She turned off the light. She slept immediately. She woke at 3:14 in the morning. The pain was specific, not the vague discomfort she had been managing for weeks. This was something with intention in it. She lay still for a moment and breathed and paid attention to her body, which had been telling her things for months, and which she had finally, in the last several weeks, learned to actually hear. She timed it. She breathed. She timed it again. She got up. She put on her robe. She stood in the middle of the room and let the reality arrive. This was actually happening. She knocked on Grant's door at the end of the hall. They had discussed this 3 weeks ago, matter-of-factly, one evening after dinner, because he was the one with a car and a driver available at all hours, and they had agreed this was the practical arrangement. He had written the driver's number in a notebook and given it to her. He had also said, without elaborating, "I'll come." He answered in 12 seconds. He was already dressed. Dark pants, a sweater, shoes on, like some part of him had been half awake waiting. She said, "Now." He said, "I'll get the car. She called Lena from the back seat. Lena said, "I'm already up. I'll meet you there." She arrived at the hospital 7 minutes after Nora, slightly breathless, wearing her coat over pajamas, which was apparently her standard emergency ensemble. The labor was long. That was the truth of it. Not dramatic in the way of movie labors. Long and real, and at intervals, uncomfortable in ways she had been told about, but which turned out to be different in person. The way most real things are different in person. Her nurse, Beverly, was from Texas originally and had opinions about everything and told highly inappropriate jokes between contractions at Nora's explicit request, because Nora had decided that laughing was a better use of her energy than screaming. Grant stayed in the waiting room. As agreed, he sat with Rosalind, who had driven herself there at 5 in the morning without being asked. Nora found out about this afterward and felt something large and difficult to name, something that was about being looked after by people who had chosen to look after her. Lena held her hand through all of it. The baby arrived at 11:47 in the morning. A girl. Small and enormous at the same time, the way all new babies are. Her cry filled the room, and Nora felt many things. A flood of things, and underneath all of them, the most fundamental and simple. There you are. I have been waiting for you. We are going to be okay. She counted fingers. She counted toes. 10 and 10. She pressed her nose to the baby's head and breathed in. This was the smell she had been waiting for without knowing it. Warm and new and entirely specific. The smell of someone who had never existed before and was now here, Beverly said in her dry Texas drawl. She's got good lungs. Carla, who had come in for the delivery, said, "She's perfect. Look at that. She's absolutely perfect." Nora looked at her daughter. She named her Wren, not from a list, not a name she had proposed to Derek and negotiated. 3 weeks ago, alone in the garden, she had thought, Wren, and she had known. She had not told anyone. She had kept it as something entirely her own until this moment. She said it out loud for the first time now. Wren. Wren Calloway. The first name that was entirely hers. She checked her phone later, in the quiet after the bustle had settled. Old habit. She noticed she was doing it, picked it up, looked at the screen. There was nothing on that phone she needed right now. She set it down. The things she needed were in this room. Derek found out through Jude. He called 3 times in the afternoon. She did not answer. He texted, "Jude told me. Congratulations. I want to meet her. I'm her father." She showed the text to her lawyer via email while Wren slept on her chest, small and warm and completely certain in her own existence. Her lawyer replied within the hour. All contact requests per the interim parenting agreement, which he still hasn't responded to, go through me. I'll handle it. Nora typed back, "Thank you." She put her phone away. Rosalind came in that evening, alone. She sat in the chair beside the hospital bed and looked at Wren for a long time without speaking. She said finally, "She has good hands, strong fingers. She'll be stubborn." Nora said, "I hope so." Rosalind said, "So do I." She reached into her bag and produced a small envelope. "Grant asked me to give you this." Inside, on heavy cream paper and Grant's careful handwriting, Wren is a beautiful name. The house is ready for you both whenever you are ready. No rush. Take all the time you need. Below that, just his initial, G. She folded the note carefully. She tucked it into the pocket of her hospital gown. Wren made a small sound in her sleep, a brief complaint at nothing in particular, then settled. The morning light came slowly through the hospital window. A nurse came and went. The monitors beeped their quiet, steady rhythms. Nora nursed Wren in the early light, and her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it. It said, "I need to talk to you. It's not what you think. Please." She looked at the number. She looked at the message. She thought for a moment. Then she typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came quickly. "Simone." She met Simone in a coffee shop 3 weeks after Wren was born. She carried Wren in a front carrier against her chest, Wren's small face tucked near her collarbone, asleep with the particular certainty of new babies who have not yet learned that the world is unreliable. Nora wore a dark coat and sensible shoes and felt, for the first time in a long time, entirely prepared for whatever was about to happen. She recognized Simone from the Instagram photos, but Simone in person was different. Smaller, less polished than her curated squares suggested. She had the look of someone who had been doing controlled crying for several days, eyes slightly swollen, jaw set with the effort of holding it together. They sat across from each other in a corner booth. The coffee shop was busy enough that no one paid attention to them. Simone wrapped her hands around her cup. She said, "He's done it before." Nora said, "I know." Simone looked up. She said, "I found out 2 weeks ago. There was someone before me. During his previous relationship, before he met you. I found messages. A whole other history." Nora said, "He told me I was the only one he had ever done this with, that I had pushed him to it, that I had changed." Simone said, "He told me you were difficult, cold, that you were never really present after the pregnancy started." Nora said, "He told me I had become someone he didn't recognize." She paused. "It's the same speech, adjusted." Simone was quiet for a moment. She looked at Rin. Her face did something soft and difficult. She said, "I was part of hurting you. I can't fix that. I know I can't fix that. But I have documentation. Messages, a timeline, proof that the pattern started before you and continued through both of us. My lawyer thinks it's relevant to your custody case, specifically the part about demonstrated character and judgment." Nora said, "Why are you doing this?" Simone said, "I have a younger sister who just got married." She said it simply. "I don't want this to happen to her. I don't want to be the reason it happens to her. And because I can do one right thing here, even if I did a very wrong thing before it." Nora looked at her. She thought about the rose caption. She thought about the anniversary watch on the balcony railing. She thought about a woman who had been handed the same set of lies in a different order and had believed them the same way. She said, "Send everything to my lawyer." She said it without warmth, but without cruelty either. Factual, direct. Simone nodded. She said, "I'm sorry, for what it's worth." Nora looked at Rin, asleep against her chest. She said, "I believe you mean that." She stood up. She gathered her things. She thought, walking out, that she had come in expecting an enemy and found instead evidence that Derek had perfected the art of turning women against themselves, one at a time, in sequence, and that the only reasonable response was to refuse to play the role he had assigned her. The mediation meeting was 2 weeks later. Derek arrived with his lawyer, who was the kind of man who had spent a career turning sympathy into strategy. He had a practiced expression of sorrowful reasonableness. He shook hands. He arranged papers. He looked across the table at Nora and Francis with the air of someone who had already decided how this would end. He had not anticipated Simone. He had not anticipated the documentation, the financial records, the messages with their timestamps, the evidence of a pattern that predated Nora and extended through her. He had not anticipated a woman who had arrived prepared and calm, and who had, in the weeks since her daughter was born, shed the last of the habit of making herself small. Frances laid everything out methodically. She did not embellish. She did not editorialize. She simply put the facts on the table in order, the way you lay out tools before repair. Derek looked at the documents. He looked at his lawyer. His lawyer leaned over, and they conferred in low voices. His lawyer made a note and leaned over again. Nora looked at Derek. He thought I'd be desperate, she thought. He thought I would be grateful for whatever he offered. He thought I was still the woman in the bathroom with the text message and the empty gym bag and 2 months of savings and no plan. He planned this while I was growing his daughter. He was wrong about all of it. She felt nothing angry in that moment. She felt something cleaner, something like clarity. Derek and his lawyer stepped out for 11 minutes. When they came back, Derek's expression had changed. The sorrowful reasonableness was still there, but underneath it was something else now, something that looked like recalculation. His lawyer said they would accept the proposed terms. All of them. Francis said, "We'll need that in writing before close of business today." Derek's lawyer said, "Of course." Nora drove home with the windows cracked and Rin in the car seat behind her. She played a song she had loved in college and had not listened to in years. She drove through the city in the afternoon light, and she did not think about Derek once, not for the entire drive. She noticed this when she pulled through the iron gates of Harlow House. She had been driving for 30 minutes, and his name had not entered her mind. She sat in the parked car for a moment with the engine off and the music still playing, just low. Rin made a small sound in the back seat. Nora said, "We're home, baby." She meant it as a statement of current location. She realized, saying it, that she meant it in a larger way too. She got out. She lifted Rin from the carrier with both hands, held her close. Grant was on the front steps. He looked at her face, and he knew. He had gotten good at reading her, she had noticed. Not intrusively, just accurately. He said, "Done." She said, "Done." He held the door open. She walked inside. The legal settlement was complete. Primary custody, structured visitation, child support at the correct figure, full share of joint assets, including the $8,000. His girlfriend prohibited from custody handoffs for the first year. His name removed from her medical records, her attorney's fees covered. It was all on paper with signatures. It existed now in the world of official things, which meant it was real in a way that text messages and departure dates were not. She had a plan, 3 more months at Harlow House to build savings, then an apartment of her own, her name on the lease. She had already looked at 2 places. One was too small. One had a lemon tree in the courtyard that she considered a sign. She had gone back to freelance work in the 3rd week after Rin was born. Not full-time. A few clients chosen carefully. Projects that could be done in the hours Rin slept. She charged what she was worth. She had looked up market rates, and she had charged them, and no one had argued, and she had understood that she had been undervaluing herself for years, and that the undervaluing had been a habit she had learned slowly and could unlearn the same way. She was sitting in the garden on a Tuesday afternoon, Rin asleep in the pram beside her, going through a client proposal, when Rosalind came and sat without asking. This was something she had come to love about Rosalind. The not asking, the simply sitting. They were quiet for a while. The roses were fully open now. The lemon tree had put out new growth, 3 small bright leaves near the top. Rosalind said, "I want to tell you something." Nora said, "All right." Rosalind said, "I was married for 41 years to a man who was not always good to me. I stayed because that was what you did. My son grew up watching me stay. Me stay." She was quiet for a moment. "Grant is not his father. He never was. But I worried. I wondered if watching me had taught him things I didn't want him to learn." She looked at Rin. "You have given him permission to be himself. The version of himself that knows how to look after someone without needing credit for it. I want you to know I see that." Nora looked at her. She thought about what to say. She said, "He gave me the same thing, without either of us calling it anything." Rosalind nodded. "That," she said, "is the right kind of giving." That evening, Nora found Grant in the kitchen making dinner, which he did sometimes, on days when he had been working long hours and needed something ordinary to do with his hands. He was cutting vegetables with the focused attention he brought to most things. She stood in the doorway. He looked up. She said, "I want to say something, and I want to say it clearly." He put down the knife. He turned to face her. She said, "I'm not staying because of the house." He said, "I know." She said, "I'm not staying because I'm afraid of what's outside it. I have a plan. I have an apartment with a lemon tree. I have work. I have Rin. I am not staying out of need or convenience." He said, "I know that too." She said, I am staying because I want to see what this becomes. On purpose. With clear eyes, with no story, I'm telling myself about what I need it to be, just what it actually is. He looked at her for a moment with his full attention. He said, "That is the only way I would want it." She said, "Good." Then we're agreed. She came fully into the kitchen. She sat at the island and looked at the vegetables. She said, "Do you need help?" He said, "You can stir the sauce." She stirred the sauce. They cooked dinner together, and it was entirely ordinary and entirely not ordinary at all. Derek came on a Saturday. She had known he would come eventually. People like Derek, people who have organized their interior life around other people's reactions to them, cannot tolerate not knowing. He needed to see. He needed to stand in the new situation and understand where he stood in it. He came for his first scheduled custody visit, per the agreement. He came alone, without Simone, as required. He drove himself and parked outside the gates and pressed the intercom, and Nora buzzed him in, and he walked up the long drive toward a house that made his choices visible in a way that was probably unpleasant. She met him at the door. He looked good. He had gotten a haircut. He was wearing the jacket he wore when he wanted to make an impression. He looked at the house, the wide entrance hall, the art on the walls, the particular quality of a space that has been well cared for by people who know what they're doing, and she could see the math happening in his face. She handed him Rin. He took her carefully, stiffly at first, the way someone holds something they don't yet know how to hold. Then, as Rin stared up at him with the profound, unimpressed focus of a 3-week-old examining the world, he softened. His shoulders came down. Something in him shifted. He held her. Nora watched him hold his daughter and felt something she had not expected to feel. Not anger, not triumph, not grief. Something quieter, something like the end of a chapter. The acknowledgement that a man can be a bad husband and still love his child. That these things coexist. That Ren deserved a father who tried, and that Nora's job now was to make space for that without losing herself in the effort. They sat in the front sitting room. Nora gave him instructions about the feeding schedule and the way Ren liked to be held when she was fussing, which was upright, against the shoulder, with a slight bounce. She gave him this information practically, as co-parents. He took it in. When it was time for him to leave, he stood at the front door with Ren still in his arms, reluctant, she could see, to hand her back. He looked at Nora over Ren's head. He said, "You're happy." She considered this. She said, "I'm getting there." He said, "I thought..." He stopped. He started again. "I thought you needed me." She said, "I thought so too," for a long time. He nodded slowly. He handed Ren back. He turned toward the drive. At the gate he stopped. He did not turn around. He stood for a moment, and then he kept walking. She closed the door. She did not slam it, she just closed it. That evening, Ren was asleep in her room down the hall, in the crib Grant had assembled without being asked and without mentioning. The house was quiet. Nora stood in the kitchen and made chamomile tea, and she stood at the window with the cup in her hands and looked out at the garden. The roses, the lemon tree with its 3 new leaves catching the porch light. The stone bench where she had sat in the early weeks, crying without knowing she was crying, putting her hands on her belly and telling her daughter, "We are going to be okay." She thought about the woman who had stood at a different window in a different kitchen at 2 in the morning, newly understanding that everything had changed. That woman had been so afraid. She had been so certain that losing the life she had planned was the worst thing that could happen to her. She had been wrong. The life she had planned had made her invisible. She had shrunk into it and kept shrinking, had adjusted herself into smaller and smaller shapes to fit inside a space that kept contracting. And she had called this love when it was something else entirely. She had not lost herself in one dramatic moment. She had given herself away in increments so small that each one was reasonable. And she had gotten herself back the same way, in increments. One conversation, one notebook page, one clear statement of what she wanted. One morning, she woke up and was humming. She was not the same woman she had been in that bathroom, standing in a towel, reading a text that ended without a period. She was more. Grant came into the kitchen. He saw her at the window with her tea. He filled a glass of water and leaned against the counter. They were quiet together for a moment. He said, "Did it go all right?" She said, "It went the way it was going to go." He said, "Is that okay?" She thought about it. She said, "Yes, it's actually okay." He nodded. He finished his water. He said goodnight, and she said goodnight, and he went back down the hall. She stood at the window a while longer. She had been so afraid of losing the life she planned. But the life she planned had made her invisible. The life she had now, uncertain, unmapped, fully hers, had given her back her own name. Not Mrs. Calloway, not Derek's wife, not the woman who was left. Just Nora, just herself. And it turned out that was more than enough. It had always been more than enough. She had just needed to stop shrinking long enough to remember it. The garden was dark now. The lemon tree they had agreed to keep, salvageable, they had decided, just needs attention, had put out those 3 new leaves. She could see them in the porch light, small, bright, stubbornly green. She finished her tea. She washed the cup and put it away. She went to check on Wren, who was asleep with the absolute authority of someone certain of her place in the world. Arms slightly raised, breath even and deep. Nora stood in the doorway for a moment. She said quietly, "I've got you. I've always got you. And I've got myself too now. That's new. But I think you're going to like it." She went to bed. She slept without dreaming. For the first time in a very long time, she didn't need to. Closing editorial disclaimer. The content in this video was manually researched, developed, and edited by our team with the sole purpose of delivering meaningful stories and genuine life lessons. Every narrative is crafted with care and intention, not generated automatically, but built word by word to bring you something worth your time. Thank you for being part of this community.